Hey guys, welcome back. Alright, we'll go ahead and continue on with the next lesson. In this case, I'm going to mention a small example of how the decentralized ledger technology works. This is an example of an Excel sheet. Now let's say we are together sitting in a classroom and we're about, let's say, 20 people, right? So we're 20 people sitting in a classroom, and let's say each of us has this exact same copy of the Excel sheet, right? This Excel sheet has a basic transaction details. Transaction ID, dollar value, from account name, account number, to account name and account number. So essentially what happens here is transaction ID is sending, transaction number 1 is sending $25 from Darcy's account, which has number 112233, to Jane's account, which is account number 667788, right? And transaction 2 is the same thing, and transaction 3 is the same thing. We have 3 different transactions. Now each one of us in this classroom, if we're 20 people, has the same exact copy of this Excel sheet. And let's say a new transaction comes up, number 4, right, and gets added to it. And let's say it's for about $500 being sent from account address X to account number, whatever, 123, to account address X, for example, XYZ, and the same account number, a different account number. So I look at the transaction that's coming in, and I see the transaction details, and I take a closer look and I see, okay, this transaction looks valid, and it looks legit, and all the information, the criteria that matches the transaction is actually correct. So I authenticate the transaction. I say, okay, this transaction is valid. I'm going to go ahead and add it to the Excel sheet. And then the same transaction comes up to every single one of us in the classroom, right? All of us have to be able to see and look at the transaction details that comes in for number 4. And then what happens is we all add that specific transaction to the Excel sheet, right? And so all 20 of us will be able to add the transaction, and then the ledger is complete. So here's what happens. This sheet represents a ledger that all of us has a copy of, the decentralized ledger, which means every single one of us has a copy of that ledger. And every single one of us in the classroom confirms and agrees and concurs that this transaction number 4 is valid and authenticated and can be added to that ledger. Now let's say, here's a scenario. Let's say, for example, after about 1 week, I come into my friend Mike. He's one of us in the classroom. I tell him, look, Mike, transaction number 2 here looks fishy to me. It does not look right. I want to be able to modify it. I want to change this amount number from 106. I want to make it $50, right? So I want to be able to change this 106 here, and I want to make it $50, right? So Mike, for example, let's say me and Mike are friends and we go back a long time, and he says, okay, that's fine, Fawaz, I've known you for a long time, I trust you, and I agree that this account or this amount is invalid. I'll agree to change it to make it $50. I trust you, right? Now, I have to go back to every single one of you guys inside the classroom, and I have to convince you that this transaction is invalid. But then, here's the thing. I don't know all the people in the room very well. They're not my friends. So I go to Jim, for example, in the classroom, and he tells me, and I tell him the same thing. I want to change this transaction detail, and I want to make it $50. Jim says, no, sorry, I disagree. To Jim, this transaction is valid and looks fine. I don't want to go ahead and move it to make it $50, right? It looks fine to me. And the same thing with Catherine, who's also in the classroom. She doesn't agree that she wants to make it 50. So here, I cannot no longer change this transaction because every single one of us has a copy of the ledger. At any given moment, for the ledger to be valid, the transaction listed has to be equal to what each of us have. So the copy of my ledger has to be equal to the copy of every single one of us in the classroom, right? So now I can no longer modify this transaction, right? I have to be able to convince the majority of you to say that this transaction number 2 has to be modified to make it 50 instead of 106, right? And so now the ledger will not be accepted. So what happens is the class will say no, we don't accept, so they will keep the ledger as is. So now I can no longer commit that change. And this is a powerful function what blockchain offers because it eliminates the risk of fraud and malicious activities. Today in a central organization, in a bank or any kind of centralized control organization, the CEO might be close friends with the IT guy or the finance guy or the head of finance or the CFO, and he can easily modify records as they see fit for their own personal gain, for their own personal interest, for fraud reasons, for malicious activities, right? In the blockchain decentralized world, this is no longer the case. This protects and mitigates the risk of when you have malicious actors or fraudulent actors who want to be able to modify records to suit their own needs. Okay, so this is one of a very powerful feature. I'll go ahead and stop right here, guys, and I'll continue on in the next lesson.